Diana, is there a problem between you and your husband? The unexpected question was asked, and for a moment, I didn't know how to respond. What are you talking about? I think we have the usual problems that any other married couple has. Why do you ask? My colleague turned away, focusing on her hands as she decided whether to continue or not. After deciding, she continued, "Listen, I don't know how to tell you this, but last weekend my husband took me to celebrate our anniversary, and I'm pretty sure I saw your husband at the same hotel, and he was there with another woman. Are you sure? That can't be. He would never do something like that to me. You must be mistaken." Maybe, but that person looked a lot like him. If it wasn't him, then he must have a twin. We saw them, a couple very much in love, several times and up close, and he looked exactly like your husband. Mark said he was going fishing with friends last weekend, but now, it seems he was fishing for something else, and obviously, he caught someone. I wanted to cry, scream, and tear his throat out all at once. How could he do this to me? Was there something wrong that made him ready to leave me after 7 years of marriage, just to lie in bed with another woman? I mumbled a thank you to Jane and returned to the office, collapsing into the guest chair. There were no signs that he was up to no good. I had heard about the usual signs like being too attentive and loving, but that wasn't the case with Mark. He was still himself, thoughtful and responsive. Could this be his game? Did he know about these signs and was trying not to show them? I was completely confused. No, it couldn't be him. It had to be someone who looked like him. But I couldn't help but doubt. What if it was him? How could I be sure? If I asked him, he might deny it. If he was having an affair, he could warn his friends to cover for him. Thinking back to Sunday night, when he returned, I tried to recall if there was anything suspicious. He walked in, kissed me on the cheek, grabbed a beer, and started talking about his weekend. Nothing unusual there. He complained that the fish weren't biting. The few small ones they caught had to be released. Yes, that was unusual. Mark always had successful fishing trips. He's an excellent fisherman and knows that river like the back of his hand. He has been fishing since he was a boy, ever since his father gave him his first fishing rod at the age of 6. But maybe he was telling the truth. How could I find out? I decided to call the wife of one of his friends to ask about the upcoming holiday, and during the conversation, I would inquire about the fish he had caught. Yes, that's exactly what I would do. "Hello, Emily. This is Diana. How are you?" Our conversation began with usual things like kids, school, and shopping at the mall. Not wanting to seem too eager, I let the conversation go on for about 20 minutes before switching to the reason I had called her. I couldn't ask her directly. That would make her suspicious, and it would get back to Mark through her husband. "Emily, do you have a good recipe for salmon? I'm getting a bit tired of the usual grilling or roasting and wanted to try something more exotic. How did you cook the fish that Dave brought home on Sunday?" I waited anxiously as Emily shouted at her kids to be quiet, saying she was on the phone. "Sorry, Diana. A recipe for fish. Oh, Dave isn't very adventurous with food, so I just used tried and tested recipes. The fish he caught last weekend is still in the fridge. I don't plan on cooking it until this weekend for the barbecue party." As she continued, my thoughts drifted in another direction. That bastard lied to me. Someone else caught the fish, but not him. Why? Because he didn't go fishing. He was messing around with some woman. When I'm done with him, he's going to pay dearly. Diana, are you there?" Emily brought me back to the present, and I answered her through the tears that had started to fall. "Yes, I'm here. Sorry, the washing machine is running. I need to go. I'll call you back later. Thanks for the advice. Bye." My first instinct was to confront him, but the more I thought, the more I realized I had no concrete evidence. He would lie to get out of it, and be more cautious. I needed more proof. That evening, Mark seemed withdrawn as we sat for dinner. He complimented me on the delicious meal, but there seemed to be no life in him. When I tried to make conversation, He responded with short sentences and was clearly thinking about other things. I hoped it was guilt eating him up inside, just like it was tearing me apart. Later, we sat watching TV for a while before he made a move. "I'm going to bed. I'm not feeling well, and I think I'll turn in early. Are you coming to bed now?" "No, I think I'll watch a bit more. The girls at the office said it's worth watching. I'll come up later. Good night." Mark leaned in to kiss me, but I turned my head and his lips only touched my cheek. The surprise on his face was enough to warn me that I needed to think fast. "Sorry, love, I don't want to risk getting sick. I can't afford to be ill right now. Sleep well." My imagination was running wild. There was no way I was going to kiss him after he had betrayed me. In my mind, I saw him pleasing his new lover. Just the thought of it made me feel sick. I sat watching a terrible sitcom and waited until he was sound asleep an hour later. I tiptoed into our room and quietly observed him. He was 6 feet 2 inches tall, his head resting on the crumpled pillow, pushed almost to the head of the bed. His hair was drenched and clung to his head and face like a platinum cap. He was sweating profusely, his body glistening with sweat. His sleep must not be peaceful, as the bed sheets were a messy, disorganized heap on his side of the bed. Mark usually sleeps very soundly, and I wondered if his restless sleep was due to a guilty conscience or if he was dreaming about her. Damn it. Mark always sleeps naked, and tonight was no exception. Lying on his back, his body was fully exposed to my gaze, and I looked at him from a new perspective. I loved this man with all my heart, and now I might lose him. Is this what I want? Maybe it was just a one-time mistake, and he would never betray me again. Did I really want to go through with my plan? I needed to know, no matter how painful it might be, or what the consequences would be. I had to find out. Mark was my first true love, and the man I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. The man I wanted to see as the father of my children. How could he recklessly put everything at risk like that? I gently took his wallet from the bedside table and quickly checked for any evidence. What I hoped to find was an address, a phone number, or even a few condoms. When we were dating, Mark always had a backup in his wallet. I quickly realized that using condoms wasn't for me, so I started taking birth control, and since then, he didn't need to use condoms anymore. This would be another sign in our marriage. There was no evidence in his wallet, nor in his pant pockets. Where else could I check? His briefcase and computer yielded the same result. Nothing. By now, the search felt like a game. Each time I came back empty-handed, I felt disappointed, as though I had lost. Then, I checked his email on the home computer, and when it was clear, I looked through his mobile phone. No luck there either. I sat in the kitchen with a cup of coffee, trying to think what my next step should be. In my opinion, he was guilty, and the lack of evidence meant nothing. I felt driven, and the coffee only heightened the excitement in my mood. I thought about what I had done so far, and decided that he wasn't smart enough to leave no trace of his deceit. I just needed to find it. Suddenly it hit me. I knew where it would be. In his fishing gear, of course. He knew I never touched his fishing stuff, fearing I might damage something. Plus, I had no interest in fishing. In the garage, I was again unlucky as I rummaged through the bait box and other accessories. All I got were a few wounds from fishing hooks on my fingers, making me even more furious. I was almost ready to give up when I saw his fishing jacket hanging on a hook outside the side door. This time, I searched more carefully to avoid hurting myself. I rummaged through the pockets and finally found what I was looking for: a free matchbook from the Hyatt Hotel in Carlton, a small town about 2 hours away by car. In my mind, this was enough to convict him and hang him. We had never been to this specific hotel, and I couldn't think of a legitimate reason for him to be there alone. Let's see how he gets out of this one. When I realized he really had cheated, the real pain began. I spent the next 2 hours alternating between anger, disappointment, and shame. I wanted to storm upstairs, drag him out of our bed, and confront him. No, that wasn't enough. I wanted to hurt him, just as he had hurt me. I needed to see him go through the same pain and suffering I was enduring. As I thought about my next move, a tiny idea began to creep into my head and gradually take shape. By the time I was ready to go to sleep, my plan of attack was almost formed. I would get revenge on that bastard. I would have a relationship with someone and bring the evidence back to Mark. I would show him that both of us could play this game. The problem is I love him, and the thought of losing him is as painful as his infidelity. I don't want a divorce, even though my first reaction was to kick him out of the house. Finding someone to have a relationship with is easy. At 32, I look great, and the guys in the office often flirt with me. A few of the sales representatives I've worked with have also flirted with me from time to time. But so far, I've always turned them down. Now I have a pool of men to choose from, some of whom are very attractive. A young guy, Andy, particularly stands out. Most of the girls in the office drool every time he walks in. He's just 21 years old and a recent college graduate on a sports scholarship. He's 6 feet tall, with deep black eyes and a muscular body, composed and modest. He seemed oblivious to his attractiveness to the women around him. His innocence only made him more appealing. I had decided Andy would be the way I take revenge on Mark. I just needed to seduce him. He was a man, so it shouldn't be too difficult. Over the next week, I started to approach Andy. I dressed to highlight my best features, wearing low-cut dresses that gave him, and everyone else, a generous view of my 34D bust. I also wore the shortest and tightest dresses I had. Naturally, I attracted a lot of attention, and this time, I played along, flirting with the guys, making me feel desired again. Not that Mark didn't do all these things for me. He was always attentive, gave me little surprise gifts, bouquets of roses, and left little love notes everywhere for me to find. Just knowing that he had cheated made me doubt my own outer. The attention from the guys was like a balm to my bruised self-esteem. Approaching Andy was easy. The first time he saw me, he bulged his eyes and stood there, wide-eyed. Approaching him, I shut his mouth, and then in the sexiest tone I could muster, I asked, "How are you, darling? Like what you see. Play your cards right, and you might see a lot more, if you want." Leaving him wondering if he had misheard, I turned and walked away, each step emphasizing the sway of my hips. This move always provoked a strong reaction in Mark, leading to passionate lovemaking. Would it have the same effect on Andy? For the next 3 days, I continued to tease him, and he became more attentive and provocative in his flirtation. Some girls told me to stop teasing him because it wasn't fair. He was inexperienced with women, and might misunderstand. Jane, on the other hand, understood exactly what I was doing, and her advice was very clear. "Diana, what you're doing to Andy isn't fair. He has no idea you're using him to get back at your husband. If you need to do this, at least choose someone who can handle what's coming." "Thanks, Jane, but I think Andy will like it. Who knows, maybe I'll do this often with him." Jane just shook her head and walked away, leaving me to continue with my plan. As she closed the door, she said, "This will be a big mistake." Andy seemed interested, but hadn't made any moves yet, and I was getting impatient. I had been cold to Mark, stopping all intimate activities. He was confused about what was happening, starting to feel insecure about my rejection, and not wanting to talk about our issues. I wanted him to worry, but not for too long. I decided that this Saturday would be the day I get my revenge. "Andy, are you busy Saturday night?" The light in his eyes told me the answer before he could speak. "No, I don't have any plans. Why do you ask?" "Well, I thought you might want to take a lady out for dinner and dancing, and maybe more. Are you interested?" "Hell, yes." Then his face clouded. "But you're married. What about your husband?" "He doesn't need to know. Besides, we have a sort of arrangement." I smiled. "He just doesn't know about it yet." "Sure." His face lit up with a knowing smile. "Where will we go?" I was thinking of a cozy dinner at a small restaurant, A few dances at a club. And then maybe we can find a room somewhere, if you don't mind." Andy blushed, but recovered enough to realize the next move was his. "Of course, sounds fun. I know a place like that. And there's a guest house not far away. I can book a room. Sounds like a date. You can pick me up at the north entrance of the shopping center parking lot at 7 p.m., and we can go in your car." I leaned forward to give him a better view of my bust, then kissed him on the lips and whispered, "See you then, love." The plan was in motion, and I didn't think I could stop now, even if I wanted to. The next step was to tell Mark that I had a girls' night out and wouldn't be home until later that night. Indeed, if Andy lived up to my fantasies, I might not come home until Sunday. That evening after dinner, I left Mark. "Mark, today I called Susan. She and some other girls are going out somewhere on Saturday night. They've invited me and I've agreed. Oh, I hope we can have a good night together and resolve our issues. Can't you go some other time?" I gave Mark a stern look. "Don't tease me." And then told him, "I'm going, whether you like it or not. It's rare for me to get a chance to go out, and maybe another opportunity will come up. Who knows?" Mark was about to respond but changed his mind and left the dining table. Turning back at the door, he said to me, "Thank you for your concern." Then he went into the workshop, probably to play with his fishing gear. I saw the pain in his eyes and almost gave in. But then I got angry, and the image of him with a blonde girl popped into my head. "Fuck you, Mark," I yelled after him. "This doesn't mean you care about my feelings." He walked away, and I don't think he heard the end part. This worked to my advantage, as he slept in the spare room for the next 2 nights. This could become his permanent room if he's not careful, was my last thought before I went to sleep that night. This was strange, as it was the first time I'd slept alone since we got married. On Friday morning, he left the house before I woke up, so I didn't know how he was coping with it. I never realized I could become so hateful, and this was really a surprise to me. On the other hand, I felt happy that he was suffering, but watching him endure it was almost as painful for me. I really love him, despite the mistakes he's made. I decided to try to ease the tension on Friday night by preparing a special dinner for him, with baked potatoes, grilled asparagus, and a salmon he had caught a few weeks ago. I cooked it in foil with herbs, chili, garlic, and olive oil. I knew it was one of his favorite meals, and maybe it would calm him down a bit. It would also help alleviate the guilt I was starting to feel. The phone rang just as I was finishing setting the table. I wedged the phone between my shoulder and ear. The background noise was so loud I could barely hear anything. "Hello, Diana. This is Mark. The guys are throwing a party tonight, and since you're going out tomorrow, I think I'll stay with them tonight. Don't wait up, I might be back late." He hung up before I could respond. He sounded very angry, and for a moment I wondered if my act of revenge was such a good idea. Damn it, why is he doing this? Going out with friends? I bet he's with his mistress tonight. Well, we'll see who has more fun. I tried to sleep but tossed and turned until he returned at 3 a.m. I heard his bedroom door close, then 2 thumps as his shoes hit the floor. Then silence. Saturday morning, I got up early and prepared another surprise for him. When Mark finally appeared, it was 12:30 and he looked terrible. He wore the same clothes as the day before, but instead of the neat appearance he had when he left, he was now disheveled and bleary-eyed. The front of his shirt was stained, and the right knee of his beige pants was covered in dirt. A groggy grunt was the only response to my cheerful good afternoon greeting. I must admit that I said that more to provoke him than it was my true feeling. Taking the cup of coffee, he sat down, or rather, slumped down at the kitchen dining table. "I saved your dinner. It's your favorite dish, so I thought you'd like to have it for lunch." With these words, I placed a plate with burnt food scraps in front of him. 2 hours in the oven at high temperature can have a serious impact on this kind of food. It took him a few minutes to realize what I had done. Pushing it away, he sighed. "That's funny." After finishing his coffee, he went back to bed to sleep off the alcohol. Maybe he really was with friends last night. He wouldn't be any good in bed in such a state. Maybe she had abandoned him. This thought made me smile. Hey Mark, if you think you feel bad now, wait until I get home tonight or whenever. Saturday passed quickly without Mark. I could spend as much time as I wanted preparing without worrying about his thoughts. Not that I really cared at the moment. This plan had a life of its own, and I was being pulled along by the forces controlling it. By 6 o'clock, I was almost ready and had just put on my dress. I decided not to wear a bra or panties for 2 reasons. First, I thought Andy would appreciate my body more if he could feel it when we danced. Second, my underwear was quite expensive, and I didn't want to lose any piece. Mark stepped out of the bathroom while I was choosing shoes. I didn't hear him wake up and go to the bathroom. He came into our room to get clean clothes and saw me getting ready in such an outfit. Damn it, Diana. You can't meet the girls dressed like this, can you? Do you have a date with someone? Don't do this, we can talk everything over. Please don't do this. His pleading made him seem weak, which only angered me more. I couldn't stand it and yelled at him. You said I was going out with the girls. If you want to talk, we can talk when I get home. Maybe then you'll listen to me. Now, pick up your stuff and get out. I needed to finish my makeup, or else I would be late. Mark stood there, then said something I never expected to hear. All thoughts of him being weak quickly vanished with the strength in his voice. Diana, I know you are cheating on me. I don't know with whom, but when I find out, that person will be mentioned in the divorce papers. Your attitude towards me for the past 2 weeks has been too distant, and now this, I can only draw one conclusion. You are having an affair. A tear fell from his eye, and he wiped it away before continuing. I don't want to be a fool. If I find evidence that you've cheated, our marriage is over. Think about this before you leave tonight. As he took his clothes from the closet, I replied to him, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. Not fully understanding my point, he went into the living room to change. Now he's on a moral high ground because he doesn't know that I know about his cheating. He wouldn't be so confident when everything comes to light. At least, that's what I try to convince myself. He didn't come down before I left, so I left a note stuck on the fridge door. I know Mark, and whenever he has a problem to solve, he turns to beer. This doesn't mean he's an alcoholic, but having a beer in hand helps him think better. Many men are like that. Mark, you know I love you, but these past 2 weeks have really been hell for me. I know we need to talk, so I've decided to come home at 2 a.m. Wait for me, and I think we can work out our issues and continue to heal our marriage. I want nothing more than for you to still be my husband, but until we sort things out, I'm afraid that will be impossible. With love, Diana. Andy was waiting for me when I arrived, and my heart leaped when I saw him. This was not the shy guy from the office. He was wearing a red silk shirt to the party, buttoned open nearly to his waist, revealing a muscular chest and abs to die for. His pants were loose but tailored perfectly to fit. He wore a light dark blue woolen jacket, accentuating the entire outfit. As I approached, I leaned in to kiss his cheek, but he quickly moved and caught me off guard. He hugged me and his lips were fierce, demanding on mine. This was not what I expected, but he was inexperienced, and I just needed to show him how to please a woman. Finally, he let me go and pulled me towards his car. The restaurant is very close. Hope you like Italian cuisine. Italian food isn't really my favorite. I usually prefer something else. But it was too late to change. Yes, I like Italian restaurants. Lead the way. The restaurant was quite good, but noisy and crowded. There was no space for romance here. I would have to wait until we got to the club for more intimate activities. I was surprised at the quality of the food and actually enjoyed it. At some point, I caught myself thinking that one day I should bring Mark here. Andy seemed to be well known here, as most of the staff and the restaurant owner greeted him by name. The plump Italian owner kept coming over to him, elbowing him playfully and winking at me. She gave the oak sign twice with her thumb and forefinger. By 8 o'clock, the food and 2 bottles of wine were finished, and we were ready to move on. The club was just half a block away, so we walked and talked. I held his hand and pressed myself against him, noticing the envious glances of other girls we passed. "You're very popular there." I realized this wasn't his first time. Hell no, I always take my first dates there. It also sets the stage for what happens later, don't you think? I mumbled a reply while processing the information. This wasn't his real first date, but what did it matter? He was shy and awkward, maybe even a virgin. Nothing in the atmosphere of the restaurant set the mood for anything. His inexperience showed once again. Once we talked and I showed him all the beautiful things in life, he would understand. Andy was a smart guy. He put his arm around my waist as we walked, and when we reached the club entrance, he grabbed my left breast. It felt really good, but there were about 20 people waiting to get into the club, and I felt disgusted. I lowered his hand and whispered, "Later, my love." I headed towards the end of the line, but he surprised me again. Andy stepped up to the door guard and greeted, "Hey man, how's it going? Got room for 2? The guard smiled at him, then glanced at the angry men in line. "For my best customer, there's always room." He opened the barrier for us to pass. Andy discreetly handed him some money. Once inside, we paid the entry fee and received 2 free drink cards. The noise was overwhelming. Even the walls seemed to vibrate. We squeezed onto the small dance floor and tried to keep up with some kind of dance rhythm. It was impossible, and eventually I signaled him to a secluded corner so we could have some private space. Now we could really start to have fun. Couples around us were embracing and fondling each other, and I felt less self-conscious in the darkness and the club's atmosphere. Grabbing him, I gave him a deep French kiss on the lips, determined to teach him how to kiss in a way that pleases a woman. He responded with a kiss that made my knees weak, his tongue touching mine and exploring deep in my mouth. For the next hour, we hugged and fondled each other. By 9:30, I was just starting to get into the vibe, and the music soothed my senses to the point where I no longer felt like I was in a bass drum at a parade. Damn, look at the time. We should go. The motel is just across the street, but Andy, I'm just starting to have fun, and we still have plenty of time. No, I told them we would be there by 10 o'clock. If we're late, they'll give our room to someone else. It's very busy here on Saturday nights. Holding my hand, we headed towards the exit. This time, we were only stepped on twice. Once outside, I wondered if I had permanently damaged my hearing as I struggled to hear the sound of cars or the people lining up. Without waiting, Andy grabbed my hand and pulled me across the street, passing cars little by little, swearing at drivers who honked at us. This night was turning into a nightmare, and I decided that this would be my only and last night with Andy, unless he surprised me in bed, which he did. When we got to the door, Andy grabbed me and kissed me while pulling my dress off. I tried to calm him down, but it didn't work. "Calm down, love. Let me show you how to please a woman." He raised his eyebrows, which I hate, then laughed. I've never been complained about until now. So he's not a virgin, but at least he's inexperienced. His approach tells me that he lacks practice in pleasing women. Oh yeah, and how many girls have? God, I stopped doing it with them when I was 17. You wouldn't believe how many horny women there are waiting around the highway looking for sex. Adventurers, teachers, PTA members, and other athletes' mothers. It's been a party for the past 4 years. Is this guy joking? If he's been with real women for the past 4 years, has he learned anything? Let's calm down and play a little first. We have a few hours to do real stuff. Yes, I love foreplay. After saying that, he threw away his underwear and pushed me down to kneel in front of him. God, he's so stupid. What have I gotten myself into? Jane was right. I should have chosen one of the older men, or maybe just met Mark directly tonight. I have to go through with this. I'll get away from him as quickly as possible, and then head home. Collapsing on the bed, He laughed mockingly at me and said, "How was it? How was it? Oh my, it was terrible." "That's fine. Mark can catch up later. He's an excellent lover, but I have to leave. I have an appointment with my husband and don't want to be late." "What time is it, damn it?" "It's only 10 p.m. We've only been in the room for 20 minutes. "Oh, you can't leave right now. I have an exciting surprise for you." While looking for my clothes and shoes, I told him that I would worry about it later, darling, but right now, I'm in a hurry. "You can't go." "What will I tell my friends when they come?" They'd been eagerly waiting. I told them you were hot and could handle them all. "I did that for you, my love. I know what people like you need." He spoke as if he were certain it would change my decision. "What have you done? How dare you? Who do you think you are? I'm not one of those girls. From where I stand, I see a married woman deceiving her husband. Now stop pretending and come back here." Unfortunately for him, the closest thing to me was a lamp on the bedside table. It had a heavy ceramic base and hit him on the head, rendering him unconscious. I wasn't sure if I had killed him or not. I checked his pulse and breathing, and he seemed fine. A small trickle of blood ran down his face, and he would have a terrible headache when he woke up. Dan, he deserved it. I grabbed my purse and ran out of the room, leaving the door slightly ajar for his friends to find him and take notice. I ran, blinded by tears, from the row of houses to my car, and slumped behind the wheel. I had to wait until my hands stopped shaking before I could insert the key into the ignition and start that damn thing. What had promised to be a very promising date had turned into a nightmare. I was angry and upset with Andy. He had made me foolishly believe in his innocent boyish demeanor, and I, the fool, had bought into it. Maybe I was a bit old-fashioned, but a date should have a hint of romance. This new approach seemed completely unrelated to seduction from his side. The journey back home was a mixture of shame and agony. I couldn't blame Mark. I had gotten myself into this situation, so I had to face it. The good thing was that I wasn't enthusiastic anymore. Walking into the house's entrance, I sat for a while, then mentally prepared for what was about to come. Mark was waiting in the living room and looked up in astonishment as I stumbled in. I didn't know if it was because I arrived early or because of my condition. My hair and makeup were in disarray, my dress was missing a shoulder strap, and my shoes were left in the car. I certainly looked like the evening had been truly royal for me. "Oh, you've done it now. All the nonsense about loving me, wanting to save our marriage. What does it all mean? Did you really think I would accept this and carry on as if nothing happened? I hope it was worth it. Now listen here, sir. None of this would have happened if you had behaved properly. I know about your little hideaway. 2 weeks ago, you were spotted at the Hyatt in Carlton with a blonde girl, so don't pretend to be virtuous with me. Everything I did was just a revenge affair, to make you feel how I felt. Now we need to discuss all of this and live our lives. I'll make coffee and we can sit down, as we used to, and figure it all out." I paused to catch my breath, and Mark spoke up. "I don't know who they saw, but it wasn't me. I was 200 kilometers away on the other side of the state, fishing like I said. Now I've played my cards. Jane saw you. She was there with her husband, and they saw you with another woman. I also found this in your fishing coat." I pulled out some matches and tossed them his way. "Why does Dave catch fish on the weekends and you don't?" "Because you don't go fishing." Exhausted, I slumped into the chair. "All right, I'm waiting for you to lie or maybe tell the truth for a change." Sitting on the chair, my skirt was lifted up, revealing the entire orgy that had just happened. Mark's disgusted look sent shivers down my spine. First off, Dave hardly ever goes fishing, but he enjoys going with us. Either we give him a few pieces to keep Emily quiet, or in this case, he bought them on his way home. Those matches are not mine. They belong to Steve. He was on a business trip and probably picked them up during his travels. One evening, he gave them to me to light a fire, and I must have put them in my bag. Mark was furious, and I had to admit he was either telling the truth or thinking fast. "What about Jane seeing you? Explain that." "I don't know who this Jane is, so I can't explain. But I can prove I was on the other side of the state on Saturday afternoon." He took out his wallet and pulled out a gasoline receipt, complete with a date stamp, from a gas station on the other side of the state, just as he had said. Dan, he was good. He must have anticipated what I was angry about and managed to fake that receipt. It even had his license plate number on it. I almost told him it was fake, but then I remembered that I had seen the receipt in his wallet the night I checked. Everything didn't go as planned. But Jane said, "Who's Jane?" "Jane, the one I work with." "No, I don't know her. I've heard you talk about her, but I've never met her. When we do meet, of course, I'll tell her everything I think. Why does she want to ruin my marriage? What have I done to make her so angry?" He's right. She's never met him. How does she know it's him? She's seen his picture on my desk quite often. That must be the case. While I was pondering this, Mark disappeared into the kitchen, probably to get more beer so we could sort everything out. "Here's your stuff. Let me know where you'll be, and I'll send the rest." He returned with 2 suitcases, throwing them in front of me. Taking my bag, he pulled out the house keys. On Monday morning, I met with a lawyer and filed for divorce. I transferred half of the money from our joint account to mine. What's left in the joint account belongs to him. Now, get out of here. This can't happen. What did I do? He denied deceiving me, even after being caught. All right. He explained other things, but not this. Maybe he swapped cars with Steve or someone, and they filled up with gas to cover for him. That's it. He just acted tough and responsible. As soon as he calms down, we'll sort everything out. All right, I'll go, but let's talk about this before you start spending money on a divorce lawyer. I know you'll understand how things really are once you calm down. Taking my suitcase, I carried them to the car and sat down, wondering where to go next. I didn't want to go to my mother's, especially in this state. The next option was a local hotel. I looked terrible, but they still gave me a room, with strict instructions. No men allowed in the room. Anyone could understand why. I tried my best, but I gave Mark a chance to think. For 2 weeks, I waited for him to regain his composure and come back to me. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore and called him at home. As soon as he heard my voice, he hung up. I called back twice, and he did the same each time. I waited for an hour, then tried again, but the line was busy. He had unplugged the phone. The next day, I called him at work, but his secretary said he wouldn't take my calls. If I had something important, I should contact his lawyer. Mark held his ground and refused to talk to me for 3 months. I tried to persuade him to talk to me and understand the reasons. If I could accept his affair, why couldn't he do the same? Every day I grew sadder. How could he not understand my perspective? I had lost all my anger, replaced by bouts of depression and crying. My life was becoming miserable, and I didn't understand why. Then I tried waiting for him at home, but he just looked at me, ignored me, went inside, and closed the door in front of me. The next day, I received a restraining order at work. This order prevented me from contacting Mark directly and prohibited me from approaching him within 100 meters. And he made sure to retaliate by telling everyone at work that I had been friendly with him and his friends, despite my denial. Others saw me teasing him and believed his story. All the men who had courted me for weeks realized the truth when I kicked Andy to the curb. That's when they understood. I couldn't stay at the hotel, so I went back to my parents' house. They sympathized with me, but said it was my fault. I should have talked to Mark. As my father said, 2 wrongs don't make a right. I lived in hope that he wouldn't divorce me. He was just trying to scare me into giving up and apologizing. But how could I apologize if he didn't want to talk to me? I remember that Tuesday vividly. I was sitting at my desk, finishing up some work with Bill, when the secretary called and said that there were 2 men who wanted to see me at the front desk. I thought they were salespeople, so I smiled warmly and walked towards them. Mark was standing there with another man, engaged in a quiet conversation. My heart skipped a beat. Had he forgiven me? Mark nodded in my direction and said something to the other man, who then approached me. Mark stood aside, not getting involved in what was about to happen. It was then that I realized my marriage was over. Diana Andrews. I nodded in confirmation, unable to speak. Your husband, Mark Andrews, is filing for divorce. The grounds for this are your infidelity. If you don't have a lawyer yet, I suggest you get one soon. Nodding to Mark, he left after completing his task. No, Mark, I think you love me. How can you do this to us? I love you. I know we have issues, but we can surely overcome them if we love each other. Mark's voice was cold, his words calculated, and almost devoid of emotion. I truly love you with all my heart, but you took that love and tore it away from me, along with my heart. Now, all I feel for you is pity. You've chosen to listen to someone who knows nothing about me. Anyway, where is she? I'd like to have a few words with her. Yes, she'll prove that you cheated, and we can put this behind us. I will call her. Running back to the front desk, I requested the secretary to call Jane for me. Jane arrived, and I thought I could finally make him admit the truth. Jane, tell Mark what you saw that weekend at the hotel. Jane shrugged and recounted her story. I saw your husband there with another woman. Mark took a deep breath. You saw me at the Hyatt in Carlton, didn't you? Jane shook her head. No, I saw your husband, not you, and it wasn't the Hyatt. We were at the Regent Hotel in West Bend. Both Mark and I were puzzled, but for different reasons. What are you talking about? Jane turned to me and said, I don't know what's going on here, but I saw that man, the one who took you out for lunch and after work. The man you brought with you to the conference 3 days in August. 2 years ago, you introduced him to us as your husband, Wally. Fear paralyzed me as I realized she was talking about a man. I had a brief affair with that man 2 years ago. This story had completely slipped my mind. Jane really didn't know my husband. At that very moment, Mark realized something and a victorious expression appeared on his face. Mark turned and walked outside, shouting for everyone to hear, "See you in court." My fate had been sealed.